Several hours earlier, I'd left the Hotel Alcazar and walked out onto Avenida de Mayo in search of a taxi. I was tired. I'd arrived in town 2 days before the show, but had booked a different hotel in the San Telmo district. It didn't work out. I had a disagreement with the desk about how acceptable it is to let children play loudly outside my door at 9 p.m., and the guy told me it was really more of a hostel than a hotel. I told him that the sign and online booking info said hotel, and that I never would have booked the place if I'd known it was a playground for screaming children. We exchanged some unpleasant words to communicate our contempt for each other, and he told me to leave without paying, immediately. So I saved a little money that way, but it wasn't worth it. The room was depressing, a street-level box with high ceilings but no windows, but I wasn't planning on spending a lot of time in the room anyway. The place was cool, other than the children's yard toys scattered outside my door and the willingness of the local kids to use them to dig a mosh pit in which to bury large quantities of joyful noise at 9 p.m. The hour and the proximity to the door of my room was my only issue. I loved the sound of children playing. But I had to figure out another hotel on the spot, and it required me to navigate the Buenos Aires subway system with all my stuff on a show day, a day which I'd hoped to spend conserving my energy, strolling calmly around the beautiful Parisian streets. Because they say that Buenos Aires is the Paris of South America, and I could see why. It's an incredibly beautiful place, and while lugging a guitar and bag of clothes around on the subway isn't enjoyable, it isn't the most exhausting chore either, especially when your new hotel is only a few stops down the line. But the day started too early, with too much circumstantial turbulence, and I was getting sick. I'd gone wandering around town on my second night in the children's mosh hostel the night before the show and got caught in a heavy rainstorm. Not late, but sometime after dark. Argentina is famous for beef, so I went to a restaurant that had an open-air Parisian sidewalk cafe feel, even though it was indoors, and ordered something I didn't understand by pointing at some words scrambled on the menu like a linguistic foreign delicacy. It turned out to be some kind of chicken fried steak and potatoes. I don't care about food, and like everything except chapulines, which is toasted crickets, and the coconut pieces in a box of Valentine's candy, and would have been happy with whatever was set in front of me. I sat next to the street, alone, and took this picture through the window. The restaurant was empty. No one else was there. I walked outside and promptly got soaked by the vaporized tsunami that had floated over town while nobody was looking. Giant water balloons splashed down on the city until everything was saturated with pneumonia and drowning mice. It was like someone was bathing horses with a fire hose somewhere up in heaven. I kept my phone dry with a $12 piece of Chinese plastic shaped like a leather coat I'd bought at a thrift store in Flagstaff, Arizona, but I couldn't keep myself dry. Getting caught in the rain that night and having to move unexpectedly the next morning on a small amount of restless sleep into a place I didn't know I was going until I got there had a deleterious effect on my health. I started to get sick on the day of the Buenos Aires show. In spite of this, and the fact that the rest of the tour was an exercise in preserving my voice against the onslaught of pneumoniac exhaustion that crept up the back of my throat like a voice-eating centipede of sickness and decay, getting caught like a wet cat in the rain in Buenos Aires remains among my most cherished memories. I shot a few seconds of random street footage after the squall had passed. Buenos Aires was a short trip. I'd only arrived in town 2 days before the show and had to leave for the Nazaré Paulista Country Music Festival in Brazil the day after. I caught a taxi on Avenida 9 de Julio, which is the street with the big obelisk in it, and made it to Jorge Newbery Aeropark to catch the flight to Sao Paulo. But before I left, I was able to check out Plaza de Mayo and the Casa Rosada, Pink House, which is the Argentine White House. Eva Perón delivered speeches to the poor and unsophisticated masses among whose ranks she considered herself a member from the balcony there. Her story is interesting. I bought a button from a street vendor which read, Donde existe una necesidad, nace un derecho. Where there is a need, a right is born. I couldn't agree less, but the button is cool anyway, and the story is incredibly interesting. There was a moment of confusion in the cab when the driver thought I wanted to go to the huge airport in the suburbs instead of the smaller airport near the center of town, on the coast of Rio de la Plata or the River Plate, which looks more like a bay than a river, but Buenos Aires isn't my town, and I wasn't around when they were naming things. The driver corrected me by saying Aeropark instead of Aeropuerto when he discovered I wanted to go to Jorge Newbery instead of EZE. Indeed, man. Jorge Newbery Aeroplace, por favor. The day was cloudy, and the waves of the river were gray as they raged against the sky. It was as though the river was trying to climb back into the clouds so that it might unleash its fury once again on the swarming streets of man. I walked up to the LATAM Airlines counter and checked in for my flight.